This video is the final video in the Chemistry of Life series, looking at the overall reactions of cellular respiration as it is inside the mitochondria. Inside the mitochondria and inside the cell has the reactions that occur in cellular respiration. So let's draw a big cell that takes up the bottom half of our diagram page. And in this big cell, let's take up about half of it with a mitochondria organelle. Of course, the mitochondria does not take up half of the cell, but we're trying to show the reaction, so we'll do that in this case. The mitochondria kind of looks like a bean, and it has two membranes. The inner membrane, though, is folded, and this inner membrane is called, these folds are called the cristae. So now we have our mitochondria and our cell. Outside of the mitochondria is the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is a jelly-like substance that fills the cell, and in the cytoplasm is where the reaction of glycolysis occurs. Glycolysis literally means the splitting of glucose. So here we have glucose that splits into a molecule of pyruvate, so splits in half. In that splitting, ATP is formed, cellular energy, as well as electrons are captured in their high energy form and transported on electron carrier molecules, NADH or FADH2, depending on the reaction or how in depth you're looking at this. If there is no oxygen present, so this is an anaerobic condition, what happens for a pyruvate molecule is it turns into lactic acid if it's in a mammalian organism. And lactic acid is what makes your muscles sore. If pyruvate is in yeast, it turns into alcohol. However, yeast does not have mitochondria. If there is oxygen present, that means it's an aerobic condition, and what can happen is a bridge reaction. Pyruvate can turn into a molecule acetyl-CoA, and acetyl-CoA can enter into the matrix of the mitochondria. Inside here is the matrix. In this matrix, acetyl-CoA is ripped apart and converted in the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle has to have some different molecules that are reused in order to make it a Krebs cycle, but the molecule that enters is acetyl-CoA. Once acetyl-CoA can enter the Krebs cycle, because it's in the mitochondrial matrix, what comes out of the Krebs cycle is cellular energy, or ATP, as these bonds are being broken, acetyl-CoA's bonds, and also as molecules are being manipulated and changed, NADH and FADH2 is also produced. So by producing, I mean that electrons are attached to these molecules and they are transported to the last phase of cellular respiration. The last phase of cellular respiration actually happens in between the membranes in the intermembrane space. There are different molecules that are embedded in the membrane that assist with this, and they're all throughout the membrane, and that's why the membrane has to be folded, so there's lots of surface area. So these NADH and FADH2 molecules, these high energy electrons, go to the electron transport chain. In the electron transport chain, is where they can release their electrons. What they're going to do is come back to the Krebs cycle empty. So now it's NAD plus and FAD plus, and they can have more electrons put back on them from the Krebs cycle. So as these electrons are dumped off, electron abbreviated E minus, they travel through the electron transport chain, and eventually they hook up with oxygen. So oxygen is the final electron acceptor. When combined with hydrogen, what we get is water. And water is a product of cellular respiration. So oxygen is the final electron acceptor. What is happening in this process is that a proton gradient is being produced, and so we can use some potential energy. That term is chemiosmosis, being able to use potential energy to do work. So as these electrons are being pumped through the electron transport chain, ATP can be formed because of an accumulation of hydrogen. So this ATP that's formed from glycolysis, from the Krebs cycle, and from the electron transport chain is why we are doing cellular respiration in the first place, to get cellular energy. So you can see our electron path. Our electrons start in glucose. Then they travel through our electron carriers. These electron carriers finally give up their electrons to oxygen, which eventually ends up in water. In yellow is the path of electrons in cellular respiration.